Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the Tuesday, December 3rd slate of college basketball DFS. Now, I'm going to be honest, this video probably is not going to be as long as the one yesterday was. This slate to me is just a weird little slate. Like yesterday, we had all these mid-major teams that we didn't really know what was what. We had a lot of new information to cover, a lot of new players, new faces to cover, right? Whereas this slate, it's a lot more teams that we are familiar with. It's a lot more situations that we're familiar with. And the games themselves are just not as intriguing to me from a DraftKings perspective. Like, don't get me wrong, these are some good matchups between some good basketball teams. We've got Big Ten conference play going on. We have got the ACC SEC challenge going on. But like from a DraftKings perspective, there's some low totals here on this slate. And there's just some not all that juicy game environments. It's actually like really hard to find 8 players to fit in a lineup that you can feel really good about. So this is not going to be like a super long-winded episode where I'm going to deep dive every single play just because there's not a whole lot of guys out there that I really feel all that great about, if I'm being totally honest. I also don't like how DraftKings did the slate, if I'm being totally honest, because, they gave us the 6:30 p.m. main slate that has all these games and then a late night 9 p.m. slate that has a lot of the better games of the night on it. FanDuel, I actually like what they did a little bit better. I've had a lot of success on FanDuel with college basketball DFS so far this year, hoping to keep that going. But they basically did like a best of slate between all of the, evening games, the ones that we have on this slate, and the ones that we have on the late night slate. So basically, here on this episode, we're going to break down every game on the DraftKings main slate, give you guys all the information you need to hopefully build some winning DFS lineups for this Tuesday slate. Now, if you have not already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel that we can move with us all the way through the rest of college basketball season, all the way up until the Final Four in April, which gets me excited just to think about. But anyway, we got a lot of games to cover. We got 8 games to cover. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let's go and get started with game number 1. All right, so game number 1 is going to be between Cincinnati and Villanova. And this game projects to be just a slog. According to KenPom, this says a 140-point total. They have Cincinnati winning 72-68 in that the KenPom score. So really, this is just not a great game environment to target. Both of these teams rank outside the top 250 in the nation in tempo. Cincinnati currently ranks as one of the best defensive teams in the nation. Villanova, usually a good defensive team, but not necessarily the case this year. But anyway, Cincinnati comes in. They have not played anybody yet this year. In fact, they have not played a top 100 team in KenPom yet. The closest margin of victory that they had was 16 points. So what you're seeing is we've seen a lot of guys who have kind of eaten up on lesser competition because they've done the thing where they've still played their starters a decent amount of minutes, even in blowout games, because they know it's going to help their metrics in the long run. So this is going to be a definite competition up spot from Cincinnati in terms of what they've been seeing all season long. Now, Jizzle James has been their starting point guard since the start of the season. He's been pretty solid. He's playing with a 27% usage rate and a 35% assist rate. He can really rack up the peripheral stats, can really fill up a stat sheet. You look at basically 5 of his first 6 games, he's been over 30 DraftKings points, which is pretty solid. He's been really, really consistent. But again, kind of the play against Villanova, I don't really know how this is going to go because there's a chance he might play a little bit more minutes. There's a chance that he could see a significantly lesser role, more on that in a second. But there's also a chance that, if he just does what he's been doing, at 32, 33 minutes as opposed to 27, then he could absolutely smash and be a great play. He's going to be in my player pool, but not a big part of it. Next up, we've got Seamus Lukosius and Dylan Mitchell, who are both above a 21% usage rate, kind of hovering around that 21, 22% range. Lukosius is a really solid shooter, particularly on his home floor. He really doesn't shoot the ball well on the road. That's been kind of like a thing for him the last few years, even though when he did play Northern Kentucky on the road this year, he was 6 for 9 from 3, so he may be bucking that trend. He is super dependent on peripheral stats in order to put up a really good DraftKings performance, and I just don't like the chances of him putting up a ton of peripheral stats in this game against Villanova that is going to look to slow the tempo down. Dylan Mitchell is a transfer from Texas, and I got to say, he's one that I was disappointed to see go as a Texas Longhorns fan. Like, he's good. He's a really good athlete. He's really good power forward in modern college basketball, and he's been really solid for Cincinnati. He's had 3 games over 31 DraftKings points so far this year. Again, much like with Lukosius, though, he is highly dependent on peripheral stats in order to put up big DraftKings numbers, so I'm hesitant to play him in a game environment where the tempo is going to be slowed down. After those 2, Hickman and Bendago are the other 2 starters, but they're just kind of like, for lack of a better phrase, they're kind of just cones. Like, they don't really do a whole lot. They don't play with a high usage rate. I'm really disappointed in how this team is used as Aziz Bendago because he was a super entertaining, super intriguing player at Utah Valley. I thought he had NBA potential, and he just doesn't look all that great since he's been with Cincinnati. But the potential is there. Wouldn't shock me if he put up like some huge number on DraftKings, just because like he's a really athletic guy. He's got a really good profile, but just hasn't really came to fruition in Cincinnati. Now, after those two, Arlington Page is a high usage player off the bench. Doesn't generally play a ton of minutes. In fact, has not played over 17 minutes this season. If he ever does, he could absolutely smash a slate. I have no problem putting him in your player pool. Probably not for me, though. I do want to talk about Day Thomas, though. So Day Thomas was this team's starting point guard last year, started over Jizzle James. Jizzle James barely saw the floor last year when Day Thomas was healthy, and Day Thomas was not healthy to start the season. But we've seen over the last 3 games, he's been back in the rotation, playing between 13 and 16 minutes every game, and he has been a high usage player when he has been out there. He actually would technically lead the team in usage over a large enough sample size. So if Day Thomas were to ever go back to the starting point guard role, that would significantly reduce the role of Jizzle James. It would also make Day Thomas an objective bargain play at $4,500. So I don't know if this is going to be, the time that finally happens, or if that will ever happen. But just know he was this team's starting point guard last year. He was slotted well ahead of Jizzle James on the pecking order last year. So if he ever does get back to that, he's absolutely got a chance to smash the slate. Now on the Villanova side, again, this is not a great game environment for Villanova either. Cincinnati's really good. They're really good defensively. They actually rank 5th in the nation in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. So on the Villanova side, Eric Dixon is their guy. He's been their guy for the last few years. But what's interesting is that he played a lot at the 5 last year, and he's playing a lot at the 4 this year, with Enoch Bokia moving to the starting center. But Dixon is still their best offensive player. He's playing over a 30% usage rate and a 33% shot rate. You see the game that they played against Maryland on Sunday, November 24th. In that game, he took 29 shots, 49 DraftKings points in that game. In close game environments, this team is really committed to getting the ball to Eric Dixon. In the game or season opener against Columbia, they lost by 10. He had 51 DraftKings points in that game. So in these closer game environments, I really do think he's a great play. Even though Cincinnati's a good defense, even though this is going to be not a good tempo matchup, I think that Villanova is committed to getting this guy the ball. He has slate breaking potential because of how many shots he's probably going to take in this game. Next up after him, you've got their 3 starting guards are Poplar, Brickus, and Longino. And I got to say, they just don't really intrigue me a whole lot at all. Wooga Poplar was a guy that we played a lot in Miami last year, because when he was at Miami, he all of a sudden turned into a really good offensive player to kind of supplement his defense. He always was a really good steals and rebounds guy. And last year, he really upped his game with the peripheral stats. He was still getting rebounds and steals, was getting more assists, was scoring more. And he was really just a guy we played a lot at Miami, but he's not that this year. Part of the reason why is because Villanova plays super slow. Another part of the reason why is he just hasn't been shooting the ball all that well from the floor. I don't really know what to make of him. If he ever shows up to be the player that he was at Miami last year, $6,200 is a very reasonable price tag. Brickus is a transfer from LaSalle, I believe, who's got a pretty consistent track record on DraftKings of these pretty good performances. I don't mind going to him in like a cash game format, but I do think he lacks the upside to break a slate in a GPP type format. And then Tyler Perkins is their first guard off the bench. Not super intrigued, though. He had one huge performance on DraftKings against Penn. Not really anything other than that. Not super intrigued at all. Like I said, you don't really have to try to do a whole lot with that game, with it being 140-point total. But yet somehow the next game we're going to talk about has a lower total, as South Carolina heading to Boston College, game 1 of the SEC ACC Challenge, right, which is brand new for this year. KenPom has this one being 70-68 in favor of the Gamecocks. That is a 138-point total. That's quite ugly. And the reason why is because neither of these teams is going to look to up the pace. Both of these teams have played just absolute slugfests of games so far this season. When you look at their box scores, both these teams rank between 240 and 260 in tempo, according to KenPom. So this is not a game that's going to get up and down, not a game that's going to see a lot of points scored. On the South Carolina side, they've got Colin Murray-Boyles, who, if you're not going to pay up for Eric Dixon, is certainly a worthwhile spend up at the forward position. He has been between 32 and 44 DraftKings points in every game except one this season, in which he fouled out in 19 minutes against Indiana. And Boston College's front court is not Indiana's front court. So I think this is a much better spot for CMB. I definitely see him getting to probably around 4x value of that salary at $9,300. I don't think Boston College's front court defense is all that great. Now, after him, the guy I want to get to on the South Carolina side is Jamari Thomas. He is a transfer from Norfolk State. He is only $6,000, and he's just super consistently putting up like solid DraftKings points totals. He leads this team in minutes and is second in overall usage rate, around 23%. So he's the guy that I want to get to. He is their lead guard. He is their point guard, and I think that when push comes to shove, if this team is in a close game, he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. I really do like his price tag at $6,000. Jacoby Wright and Zachary Davis are kind of similar players. They're the third and fourth in usage rate, but they have, to me, a lower ceiling. Like they really don't have the potential to smash a slate, especially with Zachary Davis coming off the bench. And they just have less predictability. So I would just rather play Jamari Thomas, a guy that I know is going to have the ball in his hands, a guy that I know is going to be out there on the floor in crunch time. And that's the guy that I really want to focus on this South Carolina side. And then the other guard that they play is Miles Studi, and he's just a cardio king. He plays a decent amount of minutes. He doesn't take a whole lot of shots. He's a really good defender. That's why he plays. Not really a guy you want to be playing in DraftKings unless you're like looking to game stack, but why would you game stack a game that has 138 point total? The other guy on the South Carolina side we got to talk about is Nick Pringle, who is a Alabama transfer, and it's kind of the same old story with him at South Carolina that it was at Alabama. He is a super hyperactive, hyper-aggressive player that is really good at rebounding and really good at fouling. And if he can ever stay on the floor for more than 25 minutes, he could absolutely break a DraftKings slate. For instance, look at his game log this year. With the 2 games that he has played more than 24 minutes, when he played 33 against Indiana and 29 against Towson, he had 33 and 32 DraftKings points in those 2 games. So this guy has slate breaking potential. If you are somebody who plays DraftKings and plays GPPs and you're looking to win a GPP and you play multiple lineups, Nick Pringle simply has to be in your player pool because he has truly slate breaking upside that not a whole lot of other guys have. Now, granted, is he going to hit it all the time? No, he's only done that twice so far this season in 7 games. But is there a chance that he could do it? Yeah. So do I want him to be in my pool just in case he does do it? Yeah, absolutely. So that's how I feel about Nick Pringle. All right, now on the Boston College side, Chad Venning is their usage leader, and he is a transfer from St. Bonaventure. He is a mountain of a man. If you've ever seen him play, he's big. He's a big old boy, and he's pretty solid. But the problem is he doesn't play a whole lot of minutes. Like, he just never really sees these high minute totals. It was the same story when he was at St. Bonaventure. He's not played more than 28 minutes in a game this season. I think he would be right around that in this game as well, especially considering he's going to have to put up with Nick Pringle and CMB the whole game. So I just see him not having a super high upside, given that we know that he's not going to play more than 30 minutes, given that this is a terrible game environment. I'm just not really feeling it. After him, Elijah Strong is kind of their other big who's kind of in a similar situation. Doesn't play a ton of minutes, but he has shown situations where when he does play a ton, he can break a slate. At $4,700, he's a guy that I'm probably going to be getting to because the price tag is much more affordable for a guy who doesn't need as much to kind of hit value as a guy like Venning when he still has kind of a similar upside. Now, the other guy that I do like for this team is Donald Hand Jr. He's a guy that we played a lot at the start of the season when he was really playing well. And he's still been playing well. The last 2 games have been kind of duds for him, but he is still the team's third in usage player behind those 2 big men. And really, before the last 2 dud games, he was over 28 or 27 DraftKings points in every single game, pretty consistently. And so he's a guy that's got a high usage rate. He's got a lot of potential. I definitely am going to be getting to Donald Hand in my player pool. I think he's pretty solid. Deion Brown and Chaz Kelly are the other 2 starters. I'm not interested in either of them. A guy we want to talk about, though, is Joshua Beadle, who randomly in the last 2 games has played 25 minutes in each game, 21 DraftKings points in the first one, 27 in the second one. He kind of took a little bit of minutes away from Brown and Kelly. He kind of took a little bit of usage away from Hand. So he's a guy that's going to be in my player pool. I probably would not play him and Hand together, but he's certainly a guy that's going to make it just because what if this trend does in fact continue? What if this guy is for real? Only $4,000. It doesn't cost a whole lot to find out. Next up, we've got Arkansas taking on Miami, another game in the early part of the ACC SEC Challenge. And KenPom has this one being Arkansas 78-75 with a game total of 153 points. That is the highest game total on the slate by quite a wide margin, I might add. And the reason why is because you look at these 2 teams' profiles. Arkansas ranks 55th in the nation in tempo. Miami ranks 276th in the nation in defensive efficiency. So you've got a team that's going to play fast against a team that's not going to guard them. That's a good combination for a lot of points to be scored. Now, on the Arkansas side, their guy is a Duthiero. He is their usage leader around 27%. It's really a surprising development because I just didn't think he was ever going to be this guy when he was at Kentucky. But no, he's been great. He's looking at, every game this season except for the first game against Lipscomb, he's been over 32 DraftKings points, which would be 4x value for his salary. He's had 2 games over 40. Like, he's got a lot of upside. He's going to have the ball in his hands. I like him a lot. I don't think Miami has anybody to naturally match up with him either. I think he's a great spend-up option in a great game environment at $8,100. Boogie Flan is second on the team in usage, around 24%, and he is much more tied to peripheral stats than Thiero is. He averages a little over 3 boards a game, almost 5 assists a game, almost 2 steals a game. So the fact that this game is going to be a lot of possessions, is going to feature a lot of scoring, I think plays into Boogie Flan's hands, and certainly a guy that you can get to. I think he's a slightly worse point per dollar play than Thiero, but I do think the fact that the game environment is going to be pretty good plays into Flan's hands more than it plays into Thiero's hands. I also really do like the upside of Big Z, Zvonimir Ivicic as well. He's another guy, kind of like the other bigs we were talking about for Boston College, that doesn't play a ton of minutes, but he's also shown the ability that when he doesn't play a ton of minutes, he can still get there in value, because when he does play, he has a high usage rate. He's getting a lot of boards. He's blocking a lot of shots. I really do like the upside of Big Z at 6,300, and if this game is close, if he plays a ton of minutes, he absolutely has the upside to break a slate at $6,300. After that, John L. Davis is the FAU transfer. He was FAU's best player the last 2 years. He has not been that this season. His one good game came against Maryland Eastern Shore, and Miami's a lot better than Maryland Eastern Shore, so I'm just not really going to go for him. If you're a GPP guy and you want to play a guy that's going to be low owned and does have potential, because we've seen it the last 2 seasons at FAU, I don't mind him as a low owned GPP play, but on paper it does not shape up as a good play. DJ Wagner actually leads this team in minutes, and he's had 3 solid, DraftKings performances so far this season, and I could kind of see it happening again, especially if this game stays close, because he's going to play out there. He's going to play a ton of minutes, and the more possessions that a game has, the more a guy like him who's on the floor is going to have opportunities to put up DraftKings points. So I don't mind him as like a game stacking play at $5,800. Now, after that, it's really hard to predict anybody from this Arkansas team. Calipari has been kind of fickle with his lineups the last few years at Kentucky, and he's doing the same thing at Arkansas. Like, Trevon Brazile is like almost out of the rotation entirely. Billy Richmond and Carter Knox are both playing decent minutes. Adu is like recovering from an injury. It's weird. I don't really know what to make of a lot of these other guys here on the Arkansas teams. I would probably just stick to those guys that we mentioned and gave a full breakdown for. On the Miami side, everything revolves around an injury, and that is Nigel Pack. Nigel Pack is their best player. He would be their usage leader, but he missed the last game against Charleston Southern, and I don't really know why. I can't really find any information on it, so I don't know what to make of him, whether or not he plays in this one. If he does play, I think it's a really good matchup in a pace-up spot against Arkansas for a guy who does have a super high assist rate. If he does not play, what happened in their last game was they moved both A.J. Staten-McCray and Jaleel Bethea into the starting lineup. Obviously, Pack was out, and they moved Matthew Cleveland to the bench. Matthew Cleveland is a guy that we've seen put up a ton of peripheral stats in his heyday at Florida State and at Miami, but he seems to have fallen out of favor with Coach Jim Larinaga. Only played 11 and 16 minutes in the last 2 games. I don't know why. But just that's not really what we're looking for from him. The 2 guys they moved into the starting lineup, A.J. Staten-McCray is a transfer. Gosh, I can't remember where he transferred from, though. It's going to kill me. I want to say it was one of the Tennessee schools, like Middle Tennessee maybe. But anyway, he had 19 DraftKings points in that game that he started against Charleston Southern. $4,400. You can certainly go back to him if Nigel Pack is out. Jaleel Bethea in that game did start, but he only played 18 minutes, only put up 9 DraftKings points. Not really super interested in that. Austin Swartz was a guy that was a big-time beneficiary of the Pack injury. He played 22 minutes against Charleston Southern, put up 22.75 DraftKings points. So if Pack is out, I do think that Staten-McCray and Swartz are certainly going to make my player pool. The other guys we got to talk about are their 2 bigs, Brandon Johnson and Lynn Kidd. They certainly played more through these 2 bigs last game against Charleston Southern with Pack out than they did against any other team so far this season. And I got to say, neither of these 2 guys are really good defensively, but they are big. They're like their only bigs. So I really do think they'll be out on the floor against a quite big Arkansas team. But I don't know how effective they're going to be. I don't know, what's going to happen necessarily with the usage of Pack is in. But I do think that Johnson and Kidd, they're going to play their normal allotment of minutes. They're not going to be like played off the floor like they have been at times this season. Next up, we've got Notre Dame taking on Georgia. Yet another game in the ACC-SEC Challenge. Super interesting little format here early in the season. Anyway, Ken Palm has this one projected to be Georgia 75-69 for a game total of 144 points. Believe it or not, that is the third highest total on the slate. Notre Dame is going to be playing this one without Marcus Burton, who has been their usage leader, big-time usage leader last year, and then certainly one of their more high-usage players heading into this season. He's really been a dominant offensive player for them. In the two games that they played without him already, Tay Davis has had over a 30% usage rate in both those games. He's been over 32.5, or averaging 32.5 DraftKings points in those two games. He's a great play, in my opinion. Braden Shrewsbury is second in the team in usage in those two games, averaging 24.9 DraftKings points in those two games. Don't mind him. He's a little more scoring dependent than I would like, though. He really is dependent on scoring the basketball to put up his DraftKings points. If he ever does give you better peripheral stats, he could absolutely break a slate. And then Matt Aloko has not been a high usage player with the injury to Marcus Burton, but he has been a guy who has put up a ton of peripheral stats in those two games, averaging about 22 DraftKings points in those two games. And the game where Marcus Burton got hurt, the overtime game against Rutgers, he did put up 48 DraftKings points in that game. So we know that Aloko does have a legitimate ceiling, but like I said, the usage has gone towards Davis and Shrewsbury in the absence of Marcus Burton. Now, the other two guys we will talk about are Logan Imes, had been a big-time beneficiary of the Marcus Burton injury in terms of his minutes. He played 35 against Rutgers, 29 against Houston, but only 12 against Creighton. He saw a lot of his minutes go to J.R. Konashezi. I hope I'm saying that correctly, who played 18 minutes and put up 16 DraftKings points, as well as Garrett Sundra, who played 11 minutes in that game against Creighton. Look, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to play Konashezi or Sundra, but I just wanted to get the information out there that those guys did see a bump in minutes last game, so don't be shocked if you see him here in this one. Now, on the Georgia side, Silas Demery is technically their usage leader. He puts up a ton of peripheral stats. I don't think this is a bad spot for him, especially with Georgia implied to score 75, with this game not being the worst tempo on the slate. $6,500 is a certainly reasonable price tag to pay for Demery. Asa Newell is the superstar freshman who leads the team in shot rate, and he has shown the ability to put up a ton of DraftKings points as well. He had 49 on the opening night against Tennessee Tech, and then after that, he had 32 against North Florida in that game. But after that, he's been kind of a dud. I don't mind going to him, though, because they play these really weird game environments where they basically either played like a super quality opponent in Marquette or a super bad opponent like Alabama A&M or Jackson State. So I definitely do think that both Newell and Demery are going to be in play for me. But the guy that I like the most is going to be Tyron Lawrence. So he is like the veteran of this Georgia team. He is a Vanderbilt transfer. He is a guy that has been really consistent on DraftKings, 4 straight games over 26 DraftKings points, and he's going to play a ton of minutes. It's quite likely that he's going to lead this team in minutes. They really don't like to play without him on the floor, and he does put up a ton of peripheral stats in addition to his scoring. I really do like the idea of playing a veteran presence in a big-time game like this, as opposed to playing some young freshmen. And then you've got Blue Kane, Dakota LaFou, RJ Godfrey, and then Somachiku Cyril. They're all going to play a decent amount of minutes. They don't necessarily have the best usage rates or the best minute totals. It's been kind of erratic, kind of hard to predict, but those are the other 4 that are going to be out there on the floor in case you were looking to play somebody else from this game. All right, that does it for the first 4 games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to break down the next 4. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also more than happy to answer any questions you might have if you reach out to me on Twitter. Just let me know. And also tweet out all updates for the show as well. So if you're looking to stay in the loop with what's going on, follow me at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. The Discord is a 100% free community of a bunch of people, really smart, really good people, I might add, who play DFS for a lot of different sports. College basketball is one where the chat in there is usually jumping. Just people in there all day talking plays, talking strategy, talking lineups, as well as kind of getting some injury alerts as well. We got some people who are really good at diving into those. And so if you're just looking for a community to be a part of where you can talk DFS and get some help from some good people, Fantasy Corner Discord is the place to go. And then also, if you want to know who actually makes my lineups after all these videos, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I will post my core plays for every single college basketball DFS slate, as well as why they're my core plays. So you not only get the guys, but you get a written write-up as to why they are my guys. Now, I can't just sit here and promise that you can play those and just plug them into your lineups and instantly print money. It's not that easy. If anyone says that it is, they're lying. But I can promise that you can get some well-found research from somebody who understands the game theory of DFS and understands the X's and O's of college basketball and can help you improve your college basketball DFS game. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with the next game, which is going to be Cal taking on Missouri. KenPom has this one being 81-70 in favor of Missouri. That's a game total of 151 points. That is the second highest total on the slate. For Cal, this game, actually for Cal and Missouri, this game is just a mess. It's just utterly a mess, which is a shame because it's the second best game environment on the slate. Basically, Cal has been playing their last 3 games without Javon Blackshear, BJ Oma, and DeJuan Campbell. Right. And what you have seen in their absence is Andrei Stojakovic has been absolutely outstanding. He was one of their best players beforehand, but he's been even more their best player in the last 3 games. He's probably going to lead them in shots. He's probably going to get 5+ boards, especially in this game environment. Love Andrei Stojakovic on this slate. I think he's a pretty solid play, even if those guys end up being back in the lineup, which for the record, we have no idea if they're going to be back in the lineup or not, and I can't find anything about it. We've also seen an upgrade for Joshua Ola Joseph, who's been playing at the 3 and the 4 kind of in their stead. 22, 21, 23 DraftKings points in those 3 games. If those 3 guys all miss, he's going to be a great play, bottom line. And then we're also seeing a big-time upgrade for Jeremiah Wilkinson, in the 3 games that those 3 guys have missed, 31, 22.5, 36.5 DraftKings points. So if we can find news that Campbell, Blackshear, and Omot are going to miss, then Stojakovic, Ola Joseph, Wilkinson are our 3 guys. I'm not really going to discuss anybody else because there's so much variables that go on in terms of whether or not those guys are back. If they are back, Blackshear Jr. is a great play in my opinion. On the Missouri side, we got another kind of crappy situation because Dennis Gates is notoriously fickle with his lineups. He will move guys in and out of the starting lineup. He will start a guy and play him 8 minutes. He will just do all kinds of crap. And if you need more evidence of the kind of crap that I'm talking about, look at these guys' minute totals. No one on this team averages more than 24 minutes per game, and they're not like playing super blowouts either. They played in some close games. He just doesn't like to play guys big minutes, which makes it really hard to target them from a DraftKings perspective. Now, Mark Mitchell, the Duke transfer, is in my opinion their best player. He is their highest usage player. Maybe in a close game he ends up playing more. I don't know, man. The one close game they played against Eastern Washington, he did play 31 minutes. I like him, but it's hard to trust Dennis Gates. I certainly wouldn't play him in a cash game format. Play him in a GPP because he does have a lot of upside. Tony Perkins, the Iowa transfer, is probably going to be this team's lead guard by season's end, but right now he's coming off the bench, which makes it really, really hard to play him, especially when he's at a salary of $7,900. You're really taking a leap of faith in his talent and his ability to play him at that high price tag with what he has shown so far. I'm probably not going to be doing it. I probably need to see it a little bit more first from him before I do so. Now, Marcus Work, I do want to shout out. He is a Northern Kentucky transfer who is starting to play more and more minutes. Last 4 games are 27, 22, 16, 26 minutes. That's pretty good on this team. He's been over 23 DraftKings points in 2 of those games. I do think he's a guy that does have a little bit of upside for tournaments. And then also I want to talk about Anthony Robinson, who super erratic minute totals, but you look at what he's done recently from a DraftKings perspective. He's been over 18 DraftKings points in every single game this season at a salary of $4,700. That's pretty reasonable. The fact that he's shown the ability to get there in low minute totals is pretty solid. We've also got Caleb Grill out for this game, and so we might see a minute boost for Anthony Robinson. I definitely think he's a solid play at $4,700. Next up, we've got Northwestern taking on Iowa. A little battle in the Big Ten. Big Ten starting conference play here on this Tuesday. KenPom has this game being Iowa 74-69. That is a game total of 143 points. This is an incredible pace down spot for Iowa as they rank 20th in the nation in tempo, whereas Northwestern ranks outside the top 300. However, this is kind of like strength against weakness, though, because Northwestern is a pretty good rebounding team and Iowa is not. So how can we exploit that? Well, I think this is a great spot for Brooks Barnhizer. He's all the way priced up at $8,900, but he averages over 40 DraftKings points per game. He's only played in 4 games, and all 4 of them have been pretty crappy point totals, if I'm being honest. In fact, none of the games that he's played in have been a total higher than 141 points, and he's put up over 40 DraftKings points in 2 of them, never been under 34 DraftKings points, and he's a great rebounder at the guard position. Love Brooks Barnhizer on the slate. I think he's one of the top overall plays on the slate. Nick Martinelli is another great rebounder. I watched this Northwestern Dayton game back it was a Saturday in November, and Dayton is a really good squad. Don't get it twisted. But Martinelli dominated in that game. He had 32 and 14, 51 DraftKings points. That's the type of upside that he brings, especially against a poor rebounding team like Iowa. I think he has a chance to do something like that again. Both Martinelli and Barnhizer are going to make my player pool. Do not be mistaken about that. Leach is kind of their lead guard on the ball. Last year we remember that Northwestern had Boo Buie. He's not quite Boo Buie in terms of usage, not quite Boo Buie in terms of production, but it's a similar type of role. He's certainly worth the look at 6,800 in this pace up spot. And then if you're looking to stack this game up, because it believe it or not, it's one of the better totals of the slate, that they do start Matthew Nicholson at the 5. He doesn't play a ton of minutes. And then Justin Mullins and Ty Berry are kind of their off-ball guards who do play a decent bit as well. On the Iowa side, they are kind of interesting. I think the fact that this is a huge pace down really makes it tough to play these Iowa guys. Peyton Sandfort has been great all season long. I had no problem for anybody that wants to go with him. I think he's going to get dominated at the 4 by Nick Martinelli, though. I don't think this is a good matchup for Sandfort. I'm probably going to be staying away from it, but I totally get the upside because he's a great offensive basketball player. Brock Harding is the point guard now for this team now that Tony Perkins is gone. He had 50 DraftKings points in their last game against USC Upstate. That's the kind of upside that he brings. I don't mind the idea of playing him at 7,500 because we've seen the lead guard for this Iowa team in the last few years absolutely smash. Their center is Owen Freeman, who doesn't always play the most minutes, but in a close game environment, he will play more minutes. We saw him against Utah State. That game was only 8-point victory for Iowa. He played 34 minutes, had 40 DraftKings points. I like the fact that we're getting him in a close game environment. I think he's a misprice at 7,100 with where he's at. I do think this is a tough matchup, though, considering how Northwestern is going to slow the game down, and Northwestern is a good rebounding team. But Freeman at 7,100 is a guy that's definitely going to make my player pool because, again, I think he's a little mispriced, and I think that he will play more minutes in this type of game environment. Now, Drew Thelwell, why did I think it was Darius? Drew Thelwell is a transfer from Morehead State. He was a pretty solid player for them last season. He could be a pretty solid player for Iowa so far this year. He's had 2 games over 30 DraftKings points. He kind of runs the one when Brock Harding is not in. I kind of don't mind the idea of playing him, but man, I wish he was 5,100 and not 6,100. Next up, we got 2 games left, y'all. We've got Syracuse taking on Tennessee, which KenPom has as 83-62 in favor of Tennessee. Y'all, for the most part, these SEC, ACC challenge games are like even matchups. This one is not. This is going to be a blowout. It's a game total of 145 points. Tennessee, with that 83-point total, does have the highest individual team total on the slate, even though this game total is far from the top, right? If you wanted to just full cross off Tennessee, I wouldn't have any complaints from you. Honestly, I think their guys are overpriced for the most part. The one guy that I would play is JJ Starling. He is their best player. I watched them play Texas back earlier in November, and he was a guy that had the ball in his hands a ton. That was a close game all the way down to the wire. He had 28 DraftKings points in that game. Tennessee's a much better defensive team than Texas, but that's just the type of upside that he does bring because he does have the ball in his hands quite a bit. Each of the last 4 games, he's taken over 15 shots. So if I'm going to take anybody against this Tennessee defense, it might as well be the guy who's shooting more than 15 shots because maybe 6 or 7 of them might go in. After that, the other guy I'm interested in is Jaquan Carlos. He's a cardio king, man, but he is out there quite a lot. He plays about 30 minutes a game, and he plays. He doesn't play at a high usage rate, doesn't do a whole lot while he's out there, but $3,800, you've got a guy who's going to be on the floor quite a bit. There's not really any other guy with that profile here on this slate. Lampkin Jr. is a big body in the middle, but I think he's going to be a fish out of water. He did not start in their last game against Cornell. I don't know what that was about. He's had kind of some issues in his college career, just randomly being benched, randomly getting in coaches' doghouses. But in that game, we did see J.R. Davis start. He played 23 minutes, but only put up 16.75 DraftKings points. Not interested in that situation going up against Tennessee. Speaking of Tennessee, Zakai Ziegler is the point guard, the guy that runs the show for them, and he can rack up peripheral stats with the best of them, right? I think that this spot against Syracuse where Tennessee's implied to score 88, it's a pretty good opportunity for Ziegler to put up a ton of peripheral stats. I also really like Chaz Lanier. Chaz Lanier has over a 35% shot rate for this Tennessee team, which is crazy. It's just crazy high. And he's taking a ton of shots, and he needs to be in your lineup because he's taking all those shots. And because they're playing Syracuse, Syracuse is not a good defensive team. So a lot of those shots might go in at $6,500. He certainly has the upside to give us like 5X and 6X return on his salary. We saw him put up 35 DraftKings points against Virginia, which is a really good defensive team, and then 38 DraftKings points against Baylor. So this is a guy who definitely has a lot of upside, definitely going to be in my player pool. After that, I really do like Igor Milicic. He's a Charlotte transfer. Charlotte is my alma mater. I was really upset to see him go. The minute totals at the start of the season were super erratic, but now he's playing more and more minutes, and he's putting up a ton of DraftKings points. I don't think Syracuse has anybody to naturally match up with him. He's kind of like what would be the NBA metaphor for this? He's kind of like a Paolo Banchero type player, where he's a really athletic 4 that could also play the 5, but can also shoot and block shots. Like he does a lot of different stuff. I really do like his game. And I think $7,300 is a pretty good spot for him, honestly. I'm probably not messing with any of the cheap Tennessee guys. Like, look, in a blowout, you might get a lot of Gainey minutes. You might get a lot of Meshack minutes, but they're already priced up, and it really makes them tough to play. So they're probably going to pass on the rest of the Tennessee guys. Last game of the night is going to be BYU taking on Providence. In this game, KenPom has it projected to be 72-68 in favor of BYU. That's a game total of 140 points. This is just an ugly game environment because BYU, they play a ton of guys. They're super balanced. They don't really have one guy that dominates scoring or dominates minutes or anything like that. So it's just really hard to play guys from them. Richie Saunders was a guy that we played a lot over their holiday MTE because he was just grossly mispriced at $5,400. But he's not a $6,900 player in my opinion. He's just not. Husseini Traore, great player in my opinion, doesn't play a lot. Just doesn't play a lot of minutes. Hasn't played more than 25 minutes this year. If he ever does play more than 25 minutes, he could absolutely break a slate, but he hasn't done it yet. So we can't act like he is. Igor Devin is a true freshman who is really talented, can put up fancy points in a variety of ways, but against the Providence team that's going to slow the game down, I don't like the idea of trying to play him at $7,800. I just don't. If you were about $6,800, I'd really be into it. But just this, I'm telling you, this slate's really difficult because there's just not a whole lot of plays you can feel good about with the game environments being so bad. And Devin is one of those where the game environment certainly downgrades him from my perspective. Now on the Providence side, this is another team that's going to play a lot of guys. They're going to play a lot of different minutes, a lot of different lineups. It's just really hard to target, and they play at such a slow tempo. They don't score a lot of points. It's really hard to play these guys. Pierre and Joseph are like the twin point guards that they're both going to play. One of them's going to be on the floor for all 40 minutes. But they're not really producing while they're out there, right? Like they're playing a ton of minutes, but they're not having like these huge games. Pierre has been better recently than Joseph has for sure, but it's just really hard to get excited about them when this team is just not scoring a whole lot of points. Wesley Cardet Jr. is probably their best scorer, if I'm being honest. I watched a lot of their Battle for Atlanta's 3 games. But all he does is score. So it's just really hard to get excited about him from that perspective as well. It's really hard for him to hit salary. Corey Floyd Jr. is a guy that plays a lot of minutes, but he's a big-time cardio guy, and he's priced up at $5,600. It's hard to get excited about him. Jabri Abdur-Rahim's a Georgia transfer who could get hot from behind the arc. Against Indiana, he hit 3 threes, put up 25 DraftKings points. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. But it's just it's really a bunch of tough clicks. The one guy I am going to mention is, oh boy, I'm going to butcher this name. Aaron once nailed it. Once. He played in just only the 3 games in the Battle for Atlantis. He had not played before then. 7 minutes against Oklahoma, 18 minutes against Davidson, 19 minutes against Indiana, 23 and 19 DraftKings points in those last 2 games, $3,700 salary. Maybe this could be a sign of things to come. And I think once is a guy at $3,700 that's going to want to be a part of your player pool. He could be one of the best value plays of this slate. All right, but that is going to do it for this episode. Holy crap, something went wrong with my camera. Give me 1 second. All right, got that fixed. I have no idea what went wrong there, y'all. I don't know how long it was like that because I was just going without being able to see it. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't too distracting. But that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. We broke down all 8 games, told you guys what you can expect from a DraftKings perspective from all these games. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need in order to build some winning DFS lineups for this slate. Like I said, it's really tough to feel good about 8 guys on this slate. It's just really, really tough. It's not my favorite slate, but hey, maybe, it doesn't have to be my favorite slate to be a winning slate. That's just how it rolls sometimes. I didn't really think I liked the Sunday slate a whole lot. And then I ended up winning both the quarter jukebox and the dime time on the Sunday slate. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, hopefully we gave you guys all that you need to build some winning lineups. If you got any help from this video, please hit the like button on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. I cannot stress enough how much it helps me out when you guys do that, and I really do appreciate it. If there's anything that I've done to help you, just that little bit in return helps me more than you could ever know, and I really do appreciate when you guys do that. But other than that, that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Remember, if you want more from me, follow me on Twitter, join the Fantasy Corner Discord, find the core plays on the Patreon, but that's going to do it. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you guys on the Tuesday night slate, and I will see you guys next time.